Hello everybody, welcome to The Real Deal. This is Roger Cooper. Today we're going to talk about arguably the best football coaches to come out of Ohio State. We've broke it down to 6 that have come through on voter polls. So we're going to break this down with some reasoning on why, the characteristics and attributes that lead to results that determine and make it arguable why each coach potentially could be rated as the best in Ohio State football history. And we know Ohio State, of course, is a legendary school with a legendary program, so it's quite an honor to even be recognized in this conversation. So let's go ahead and look at the data. So what do major universities really expect when they hire a head football coach? Is the politically correct terms of intercollegiate athletics and tradition and things of that nature? No, it's absolutely about wins. Wins generate money, and when it comes down to it, money is what makes the world go around. Ohio State's football program is worth $1 billion. You look at that $1 billion, and it funds, programs way outside of the football program. It funds every other sport, and a huge part of the budgetary items, along with the rest of the university. The second really is strong public relations. They want a coach that's going to do and say the right things, engage the community, and again, spread a really good image or shed a good light upon the program itself. But it should go deeper. It should go about the players, or should be a strong part about the players. Leadership is deeper than just a win-loss record. It should be about bringing out the potential of the young athletes. I think that's just as important as anything else. So let's go ahead and let's look at the coaches we're going to be talking about in chronological order. That's going to be part of this top 5 list. So obviously the majority of this list is going to be no surprise. The great Coach Woody Hayes, Coach Earle Bruce, Coach Tressel, Coach John Cooper, Coach Urban Meyer, and Coach Ryan Day. Now, I did indicate we're talking about the top 5, and I've got 6 coaches there, and we'll get into that here just in a little bit. So the first thing we're going to look at is overall win percentage. Coach Day actually leads the pack, although he does only have 1 year. And again, I'll get into why I've included him into this top 5 category when all the other coaches have 5 or plus years. Coach Myers, though, for the coaches that do have over 5 years tenure, he's clearly at the top with 901 winning record, and then Coach Cooper following up the rear with a .715. Moving on, we're going to look at the overall win percentage versus Michigan. Coach Meyer in his tenure at Ohio State, undefeated against the Wolverines. There were a few close calls, but the Buckeyes prevailed in every case. Coach Tressel come in after a very lengthy domination by Michigan during the Coach Cooper tenure. Coach Tressel come in immediately and changed that up and also dominated the Wolverines. Coach Hayes, Coach Bruce, both winning records against the Wolverines. Coach Cooper absolutely dominated by Michigan. He finished with a 2-win, 10-loss, a 1-tie record. And of course, if you're from Ohio or Michigan for that matter, the rivalry is huge. It has been considered or expressed as the greatest rivalry in sports. And at one point that held true. The 1 year back in 2006, it actually determined who was going to the national championship when Ohio State was ranked number 1 and Michigan number 2. But anyhow, very important stat. In some cases people joke about it, but you could actually probably go winless throughout the season. But as long as you beat Michigan, it seems like people may find some happiness or joy in the results. So looking at Big Ten championships, Coach Bruce, 50% of his career as the head coach, I believe 9 seasons, he was a Big Ten champ. Also, Coach Meyer, 50% of his career at Ohio State, he was a Big Ten champion. Bowl win percentages, Coach Meyer leads the pack there at .67. Coach Bruce taking second place there at almost .63. Coach Tressel at 60%. And Coach Hayes actually under 500. But you got to consider back when Coach Hayes was coaching. Right now we've got a gazillion bowl games. Back then, I think you had the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Orange Bowl. Don't quote me on it, but there were just a few bowl games, maybe 10 to 15. Whereas now, as long as you have a 500 record, you go to a bowl game in Division I football today. So it's a little bit of an unfair category with Coach Hayes, again, because there wasn't the options to make it to a bowl game that there are today. Looking at national championships, kind of this inverts from the bowl games. Coach Hayes coached, I believe, for 28 years, but in that span of time, 5 national championships. You break that down, it's a little over a national championship, every 5 to 6 years. So, what an outstanding coaching, career Coach Hayes had on the national championship side of things. Coach Tressel and Coach Meyer both each have a national championship. And Coach Bruce, with his career, didn't quite land one, and Coach Cooper come close on the verge. I think it was the Rose Bowl year. Can't remember what year that was, but he did win the Rose Bowl. The Buckeyes won the Rose Bowl and finished second place. I think the loss then was to Michigan State, kind of a thorn in Ohio State's side in those critical seasons. So now we're going to go into some different waters or different territories as far as statistics. The number of All-Americans produced, not actually recruited, but produced, because it's not necessarily, nobody knows what you're going to get when you recruit a player. It's what you do with those players. For example, you could have a walk-on. In many cases, there have been walk-ons or players that were less, had a lower rating as far as their star rating in recruiting, and have turned out to be, Heisman winners and All-Americans themselves. So what I've done is I've taken during that coaching career or the tenure of that coaching term, and any All-Americans that were produced under that coach, they're getting credit for that All-American. So when you look at that, Coach Tressel by far produced the most, and this is per season, by the way, produced the most All-Americans. Coach Meyer following up at number 2, and then Coach Hayes. Coach Cooper at 4, and Coach Bruce was a little low on the All-American production during his tenure. But Coach Tressel, he led the way there. Now, one of the fun things people like to look at, and Ohio State has been very dominant in especially recently, with the number of draft picks that have gone into the National Football League. So when you look at, again, the number of picks or the players that go each year into the National Football League, Coach Meyer averaged 7 players per season going in the NFL draft, with Coach Tressel following up at number 2, and then Coach Hayes, then Coach Bruce, and Coach Cooper pulling up the rear there. That's going to come into, when you look at the number of All-Americans per season, and the number of NFL draft picks, we're going to talk about that when we start getting to the subject of Coach Cooper and recruiting here down the line. The last charter graph we're going to look at is losing seasons, which is a huge one, and this graph says a lot, actually. When you talk about the number of losing seasons in a tenure, Coach Meyer, Coach Tressel, and Coach Bruce all had winning seasons. Coach Bruce's last season that he coached, I believe, was 5-4. He had to beat Michigan to avoid that 500 record, which he did. Coach Hayes, .07 in his 28 years. He had one small blemish on there. But when you look at Coach Cooper's tenure, it's self-explanatory just here looking at the graph. 13 seasons, and there were 2 years with no bowl games due to the record. Now, everything we just talked about as far as the graphs, I've broke down and I've listed, position 1 through 5 in each category. And when you look at overall win percentage, Coach Meyer at the top of the pack there, Coach Cooper at the bottom. When you look at bowl win percentage, Coach Meyer at the top of the pack, Coach Cooper at the bottom. When you look at average national rank, which I'll have a visual on that down the road, Coach Meyer at the top, Coach Cooper at the bottom. When you look at Michigan win percentage, Meyer, Cooper. When you look at national championships, Hayes, Tressel, and Meyer, have the only national championships from the Buckeyes. When you look at Big Ten championship percentage, Bruce is at the top, Cooper at the bottom. When you look at NFL draft percentage per year, you have Meyer at the top, Cooper on the bottom. All-Americans percent per year or per season, Tressel at the top, Bruce on the bottom. Looking at losing seasons again, that's the only place that Coach Cooper actually leads the pack. And I don't say that to sound, sarcastic. It just is what it is. But when you look at this graph and you take into consideration these are the coaches that had the longest tenures at Ohio State, really the heart of Ohio State's history, and you look at the top and the bottom, it really says a lot about the impact of a coach, and you start looking at records and bowl games in Michigan, and it all starts really falling into place, and we're going to talk about that here coming up next. Going to kind of highlight, each coach and their contributions to the program, and of course, Coach Hayes. I think, in my opinion, he's the architect of Buckeye history, Buckeye football as a nation. Secondly, the 10-year war. Coach Hayes actually coached Coach Jim Beckler. Coach Jim Beckler was an assistant coach under Woody Hayes at Ohio State. But that rivalry, which again became classified as the greatest rivalry in sports, Coach Hayes is the father of that. One of the things that I think, in my opinion, being of his contributions as a head coach at Ohio State, but he was a naval officer. Salute for that. Probably the biggest impact that, in my opinion, and it's really a limited opinion because I had never had the privilege to meet him or play for him. But it's clear to see, Woody Hayes facility. There are so many things that are named after him. All these years have passed since he's passed away, and there's probably not many conversations about Ohio State football that come up that Coach Hayes isn't part of that. But he has done so much and made such a huge impact, and it really is a testimony to anyone's life that after so many years of being passed away or have left this earth, that their name is still synonymous, as big as ever, if not bigger than ever, with any organization or team. And Coach Hayes definitely exemplifies that. The one blemish, I think that goes against Coach Hayes, or some people will remember him for in an adverse capacity, of course, is the Clemson bowl game, where Coach Hayes got very emotional, and I don't know what was said, from the player that made the interception from Clemson, but obviously there had to have been something there that triggered the emotion from Coach Hayes. But that I think is the only thing that Coach Hayes could ever be critiqued for in his coaching career. So exiting Coach Hayes, incoming Coach Bruce, who had been with the program obviously under Coach Hayes, bringing the same mentality or coaching style. Definitely a very intense football coach. One of the things I've watched a couple documentaries, I've also had some conversations with some, great Buckeyes that played under Coach Bruce, was when he did take over. He wasn't into the big, showboating and dressing for individual style. He was a team coach, and he had noticed that all the players were wearing headbands, and he threw a major fit. Who authorized these headbands? Only to find out that the players had decided to wear headbands with Coach Bruce's name on it to honor and really welcome him into the ranks as the head coach. That they were going to follow him and they believed in him, which was really a great testimony. Outside of that, the 9 years that Coach Bruce did coach the Buckeyes, again, half of that career was Big Ten championships. A spit and nails kind of coach, I think, probably led up to some of the reasons maybe why he had departed as the head coach. He wasn't really so much a yes man, and again, we talked about wins and the importance of wins at the beginning of this video, or little documentary, if you will. He went 5-4 his last season, and that was one of the justifications the university tried to use, of course, to let Coach Bruce go. But how do you let a guy go that's winning half of his career's Big Ten championships, never had a losing season, and did very well, against Michigan? We're gonna kind of jump ranks here as far as chronological order, and we're going to go to Coach Tressel. Again, we'll come to Coach Cooper here later, towards the end of the documentary or the video. But Coach Tressel, comes in, and one of the first statements that he had given was, of course, the importance of the, beating Michigan. And Coach Tressel comes from a football family. His father was a, legendary high school football coach as well as a college football coach in Ohio. And so, he brought a very strong presence. He was also a quarterbacks and wide receiver coach back in the 80s for the Buckeyes under Coach Bruce. So when Coach Tressel come in, he come in with a great sense of Buckeye tradition or Ohio tradition. His entire family, just Ohioans to the core. But when he did come over, he inherited a broken program and quickly turned that around to winning a national championship. So enter Coach Myers, coming from Florida. Obviously, had a national championship against the Buckeyes, which was fairly painful. But quickly just capitalized on taking what Coach Tressel had done and into new heights. First being undefeated against Michigan. Secondly, having a great bowl series, beating Alabama quite handily. Just seemed to have a great sense with recruiting. Fantastic recruiter. I think the only thing that blemishes I would say that Coach Meyer would have is, one, I think there was a loss of football family, former players, teammates I've had. A lot of consensus that he didn't value or have the same welcoming disposition as Coach Tressel did with former players. The only blemish on the field, of course, was really the embarrassing loss against Clemson. I don't think Ohio State got shut out in a bowl game, going clear back to 1921 or something like that. But that was a major defeat that wasn't indicative to Ohio State football. But again, it happens. The only thing that I personally would have, a little more expectation for Coach Meyer on was his veteran relations. I know that there's all kinds of public affairs stuff that happens, and it gives the impression that veterans are being recognized, but deep down, I don't think that was the case. For example, the ROTC units there at Ohio State had come up with a project to install a chair in the stadium commemorating POWs and MIAs, and Coach Meyer wasn't the biggest fan of that. But outside of that, all in all, what a tremendous winning record, recruiter he was, and handed Coach Day off, quite some big shoes to fill. Again, we were going to, basically list the top 5 coaches for Ohio State football, and I'm talking about 6, but, Coach Day comes into the picture here. One, he did a fantastic job filling in for Coach Tressel during the suspension. Had a great season last season. Very, very productive. It seemed the football program, the players, everybody was very, very in tune in both, on the football field and off the football field. Sense of football family definitely brought back. The only thing with Coach Day, of course, the Clemson game, aside from the officials, that's a whole other story. But the officials only blew one call in my mind, or my opinion. That was the obvious reception, return for a touchdown. That was a touchdown for the Buckeyes. But that was not a game changer. But again, that's a whole other story. But Coach Day just brings that excitement, that smile, that football family back, and he had a great season last year. He's proven to be, a dominant football coach. I think that's going to go nowhere but up. So he's definitely in this conversation. So here I am in Fort Irwin, California, out by Death Valley, finishing up my 4-year enlistment, dreaming about being a Buckeye, and the coaching change at Ohio State. Coach Bruce is on his way out, and a new guy I'd never heard of before, John Cooper, coming in. And the first thing that I hear, through the media or through the news, is a statement that he makes at a Rotary Club dinner where he says there are too many slow white guys. and that's one of the things that he's going to change. And well, I'd probably be the first to broach on this, taboo subject. Yeah, I think if you lined every football team up, and you watch the fastest guys on the team or recorded the fastest guys on the team, chances are, your black athletes are gonna be leading the pack there. But you don't come out and say such things, one, because of the politically correctness of it, but also there's a way around. There's a more professional way of saying, hey, we're going to work on our speed. You don't have to come out and categorize or segregate the team, because quite honestly, in some cases there were some pretty fast white dudes. But that's one way to alienate, a good part of your team. It's just wasn't a wise thing, was not an appropriate thing to say, especially in one of your first public speeches. But anyhow, those things only compound through Cooper's career. The next one is when asked about Michigan or the Michigan game, quote unquote, he says it's just another game. Well, when you grow up in Ohio and Michigan, when you're around this rivalry that Coach Schembechler and Coach Hayes have built, it's not just another game. I mean, families. It becomes a celebration, almost an annual celebration, as big as Christmas or Thanksgiving. The Buckeye-Michigan game. No, it's not just another game. Families live for this. To see this spectacle, and players. It brings a whole new level of intensity to the players. Any players that you talk to about this game that have the privilege and experience of playing in these big games. It's not just another game, but I won't beat a dead horse there. Making such a statement and then producing a 2-10 record against Michigan, again, it just sometimes a person should maybe say less and do more, or at least wait to express your opinion until after results are posted. So here's a quick visual on the Michigan series as well as the bowl game series under John Cooper. But out of the 13-year career tenure, produced 2 wins against the Wolverines and only 3 bowl wins. So it was that's self-explanatory graph right there. But that's one of the things, again, at Ohio State, if you're going to be a head coach, those are 2 areas that you have to dominate. Spring game attendance, that's another factor to consider. The past few years, the Buckeyes are almost selling out the spring games, and I do mean sell out. Tickets are selling for $5 a piece. Doesn't sound like much, but there's a charge, and 100,000 seats being sold. Back in the 90s or so forth, when I played, the spring game tickets were given away, and I think the attendance was right around between 5,000 to 7,000 people. So huge difference in the spring game participation. Looking at graduation rates, under Coach Cooper, I think the overall tenure was right around 30%, in that range, where the national average was over 50. Coach Meyer finished his last couple of years with an 80+% graduation rate. Now, one of the things often said when talking about John Cooper's coaching career at Ohio State was he was a great recruiter, and I'm calling not to that. Ohio State, the program's history alone is a great recruiter for itself. But we'll look at some of the big FUBARs by Coach Cooper. Key-Jenna Carter, right here from Columbus, Ohio, visited Cooper within 5 minutes, basically said that he was not interested in Ohio State. He was going to go where there was tradition, and he ended up playing for Coach Paterno, Heisman runner-up and #1 pick in the NFL draft. Then, of course, you've got Desmond Howard, famous Heisman pose, beating the Buckeyes. From Fremont, Ohio. Went on to win the Heisman again at Michigan and had a really good NFL career. Following up another Michigan player that went on to win the Heisman Trophy, Charles Woodson. Charles Woodson's from Toledo, Ohio. Didn't play for the Buckeyes. Didn't play for Cooper. Went out and played there at Michigan. Also got a national championship and went on to the NFL again. Had a great NFL career. A person from my hometown, Ben Roethlisberger, quarterback from Findlay, Ohio, ended up going to Miami of Ohio and had a good career there. Actually almost beat Michigan in the Big House during his college days at Miami. Went on to win 2 Super Bowls and a Super Bowl MVP. The biggest hit to Cooper's career is Ryan Brewer. Running back out of Dayton, Mr. Football. Cooper said he was too small to play. Brewer was even willing to be a walk-on, and Cooper denied that. So he went to South Carolina, played for legendary Lou Holtz, and ended up destroying the Buckeyes under John Cooper in the Hall of Fame Bowl. Absolutely dominated. Brewer had 300-400 total yards offense, which basically ended in Coach Cooper's career. Brewer come back the following season and actually beat Coach Tressel as well in the Hall of Fame Bowl. But that takes us to basically the average national rank per coach we talked about. And you have, of course, Coach Day only has one season, but he ranked number 3 in the country, where Coach Meyer's tenure was average number 5, Coach Tressel average number 8, Woody Hayes and Coach Bruce average number 12, and John Cooper averaged 16th in the country during his career. So those are pretty strong reasons why I believe, again, Coach Cooper has moved to the back of the pack and really, in essence, out of the conversation. With my military experience and also my football experience, including at Ohio State, briefly in the National Football League, I've also been a general manager in major manufacturing for almost 20 years. So, I think I got a pretty good handle on what great leadership is and the attributes of great leadership. So there's a little bit of personal reasoning, I guess I would throw at my rating, but I think I can back it up, or have backed it up with very, very tangible data. So with having reviewed everything, let's go ahead and let's look at who's the greatest coaches, the top 5 greatest coaches in Ohio State football history. Well, that concludes, all the information and the rating system. I'm sure there's going to be some people that have a difference of opinion, and that's okay. That's the great thing about sports. We're all going to have a different opinion. We're all going to look at things a little different. That's basically the information I've taken and compiled from the voters out there, my own experiences, and of course relationships I have with other Buckeyes that have had experiences and been coached all the way back under Coach Hayes. So that's where we're at. Really appreciate you spending time viewing this with us today, and look forward to seeing you guys here again soon in the near future. Take care.